Welcome to the show. I'm excited, extremely excited for my guest today. Steve Anderson, Coach Steve, is a father coach, and you can find him at steveanderson.coach, which is really cool. .coach. You don't hear that every day. And welcome to the show, Steve.
Thank you, Dan.
Tell us where else we can find you.
The best place to go is I have the Best Dad Project, which is a page on Facebook. And the reason that it's called the Best Dad and not like Great Dad or something is because, for me, it's the best dad you can be in the moment, and sometimes that's just keeping your cool, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you just did a great job. So the Best Dad Project on Facebook, I usually post things every weekday, and you can see what other stuff I've got coming up.
So you focus on fatherhood.
Yes.
How is fatherhood different than other hoods?
Oh, man, that's a good question. It's dang hard.
Mm-hmm.
And most of us are going off of what our dads did, who are going off of what their dads did or didn't do, right? So as far as like who we're learning from, it's incredibly tricky, right? So for my dad, he ended up couldn't handle stress really well and had a nervous breakdown when I was a teenager, right? And was actually, in a hospital, so he didn't kill himself. And so not a great role model for dealing with work stress. So it's like now as I got older, I'm like, well, I'm going to have to figure this out myself. And he did some wonderful things, right? So I think a lot of us, right, we take things that our dad did, and we're like, I like that, I'm going to try to do it. Or I hated that, and I'm going to do the opposite. And then what we end up doing is becoming at first the dad that we wanted and not the dad our children need, right? Because they're different. That's one of the tricky parts.
The dad we wanted.
Yes.
Not necessarily the dad that these other
Human
individuals need.
Yeah.
If I could jump in for a second, that is so important because I work as a therapist, I work as a coach, I work with parents, I work with teens. And when we're not taught how to do something, we don't know how to do something. I know I don't want to be quite like my dad, but it doesn't mean I know how to get there.
Right. And I think there's two big things. You can think of the psychology of it or how we work, or even, the neuroscience about how we kind of create patterns in our lives. So there's that concrete behavioral stuff. And then there's the stories, right? The mythology that we have wrapped around who our folks were, who we are. And it's like finding the balance between, right, you might be super motivated to do something, but if in the story in your head is you're incompetent, those two, it's not gonna, I can give you 20 different ways, right? Well, start small and do all these other things. But if you got that background story, right, because you always hear that voice, you're going to fail, you're hosed, right? And if you've got the story that I'm going to be great dad and here's what I'm going to do, and I know if I just follow these steps, but you don't have, resiliency built up, that's not going to work either. And we really focus on the present and the future is, who's the dad you want to be? Right. And that vision to focus on, right, have a vision first and say, okay, if you want to be the dad who's doing this, what do you need to start doing that? Right. So you can start moving in that direction. And I think the coolest thing, or I don't know if it's the coolest thing, but it's a really nice, comforting thing, right? The game ain't over till we're dead as dads. We got a chance to reach out one more time. We got a chance to, if we had a good relationship, keep that going, make that better. If we've screwed up, we've got a chance to do what we can to make that better. Not that once our kids become adults, they're not going to be making their own decisions based on what we did. I mean, you can never make somebody, I tried hard, so forgive me. It doesn't work.
So we can always turn it around, and parenting is a lifelong job.
Yes. And, like my own dad, he just told you that little brief story, right? And for him, he was so wrapped up in his dad died when he was 5. And his mom would date alcoholics. And so from 5 years on, that's kind of his experience. And he had a lot of anger over that. And that anger kept him from being able to kind of see what was going on. And once in like boy, I think it was around 50. He's like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
He kind of flipped and we could actually start talking about, hey, I felt heard, and our last 20 years were way better than our first 20. And in the middle was decent because I mean he's a decent man. There's a lot that I could take from him, but not the closeness. I had to do that part with my boys differently. There's stuff we take from our dads that we want to do, and there's stuff that's like, no, but then it's figuring out what are you going to replace it with.
So I assume you started to help others by going through your own experience.
Yes, I first started a group called Boys to Men. Now it's Boys to Men USA. And so for over 10 years, I worked with them. So then I'm working with, teenage boys and doing the mentoring, which was, I came into fatherhood later and ended up adopting my boys. And I got to tell you, I was so grateful to get that emotional awareness and the time to spend with those boys, just being not their dad, because I was a mentor, but being the adult. And here's a case where I was the adult I wanted in my life. That changed me. There's a total healing element of that where it's like, okay, I can let that stuff go. I'm being the man I'm supposed to be. Working with teenage boys, you got to play the long game, and you have to show up and you have to be there. And it doesn't matter if you're only talking about music, right? And maybe you have to talk about music for 4 months,
Mhm.
and then on that fifth month, they're like, okay, you're actually going to stick around for what you said, So I thought that was really good to really get me thinking of the long game when it comes to relationships with my boys.
And what are the traps and the challenges you see fathers facing?
The biggest is absolutely the stress, the work-life balance, whether it's the hours, the working condition.
And be an active parent. That's sort of changed from my parents' generation as baby boomers passed on to me. It's different. Fatherhood is an active role. So how do you work with men to handle
Well,
this?
I took a really cool 14-week class on neuroscience for coaches.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And really actually looking at, everything from how setting up your environment to win, because the environment always wins, right? If you want to play catch with your daughter, make sure that the ball is out where you can see it and you don't have to dig through it in the garage. So when that moment hits, you can just grab it and get out there. So
I like that.
there's some really cool things that, everything from setting up the environment to, starting small, because if you start small, you get to success, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you start, oh man, that was cool. And you build up successes, instead of having a big project and then you fall flat on your face and it's like, well, hell, why do I even try? So there's the concrete things like that, which are strategies. And then I think the difference between a counselor and a coach, the way that I think can explain it best is, one of the things a counselor will do, right, that a coach doesn't, is that a counselor will delve into the past,
Mm-hmm.
right, and what happened and the emotions from it. And from a coach, it's like, no, we're not trained for that,
Mm-hmm.
for one. And so what the good coaches do is like, okay, so that thing happened, and right
Mm-hmm.
now here's the behavior that's going on because of it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's look at the behavior in the present, see where you want to go in the future and change that. And I think, and that's what good coaching, right,
Mm-hmm.
recognizes. There were those things, but we're not going to go there, but we're going to acknowledge that might be why you get really angry, when this thing comes up. Okay, so let's deal with the anger in the moment. How can you set yourself up to, whether it's breathing, so when that thing happens, I've got other options. And I think, that is something that so many men, and this is where I'm working with men and boys, so many of us don't think we have options, or there's two options: anger and apathy,
Mm-hmm.
right? I remember with boys, your girlfriend dumps you, you can either be angry or you can be
Mm-hmm.
apathetic and say you don't care.
Mm-hmm.
We're conditioned for very limited emotional expression. One time I got to the point where I would actually be leading some of the weekends for boys, and me and this other guy, his actual name is Hunter, which is a pretty cool name when you're working with teenagers, but he was also, I mean, he was an amazing person. We went to Bermuda, and there was a school that was basically Bermuda island, 80,000 people, right? So it's not a big place. This was the school that all the boys went to before basically they were just thrown away. You know what I mean? So all of them had struggled in school, been kicked out of the regular schools they're doing there. And there's an academy, and it was good because they dealt with the emotional stuff. When they started class, they'd figure out who was pissed off first. And that, well, let's deal with that. One of the most powerful weekends that I've experienced. And every boy there, in one way or another, biggest thing was they wanted to be seen and accepted by their dad. To me,
Yeah.
that's job one, right? And it doesn't mean accept crazy behavior or anything like that, but accept if you're a jock, your son might not be, right? Or accept who they are, what their personality is, what their interests are. And man, if we can see them and accept them, you're at a good spot. You know what I mean? If your kid comes back to you and he's 28 or she's 28 and says, Dad, I didn't like this, and this, but you saw me and you accepted me. I think I can live with that. If that's what my boys come back to me, one of them's already a young adult. But I guess if I would look at, and this has been interesting talking to other men about it, right? And I think I would encourage every guy, right? If you can, talk to other fathers, because as you talk about it, your ideas become more clear. And as I've been talking, about what I do, I think that is such a core piece to me of what I think being a good dad, remember, best just in the moment is, can you just see your son, see your daughter, right? Accept them where they're at. I think all of the other stuff, helping them, the guiding, they're going to be much more open to it.
Right. You're going to go into it with less judgment.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know about you, I relate to that today. You feeling judged by your parents, feeling like you're getting signals that they're disappointed or that they don't have faith in your judgment.
Oh, well, you know what, Dan, I got the flip side of that. My parents were very, as long as you're happy, as long as you're happy, basically, right? As long as you're happy and not hurting anybody, we're happy for you. And I'm like, I'm not saying I would rather have that judgment. Okay, our oldest son is into creative writing. I'm a writer too. I love it. I think that's cool, but also you don't get paid a lot for writing. And my wife is always, okay, what's your minor? Do the creative writing, have that your major, but have a minor in finance or something that's practical with the, something that you can get employed and have a job. And I like that balance, right? Of, you know what, I want you to be happy, and I'm your dad. Some of the things you're doing, I think, aren't leading where you want to go, and I'm going to say that. And then age appropriate level of stepping back and not being the helicopter parent that you've been talking about.
Finding room to guide and advise, but at the same time, having that peace where they giving them love and unconditional support.
And I think we have to find that balance with each of our children too, because they're so different.
So if you treat all your children the same, they're probably not going to feel like you're really listening.
You're not seeing them for who they are. It's like, why are you doing that? And how is that working right now for your kid, right? Is the cookie cutter working?
That's like a good question to always ask. How does that have to do directly with Kyle? Not with kids, that individual. And it's hard. I got a 13-year-old.
Okay.
And I find the biggest challenge for me as a parent is just not talking a lot. Just recognizing, all right, this is your own anxiety, or you've already told him this. Just hanging back, because, do you find kids emerge as amazing people?
Oh,
when we let them.
So I adopted my boys. Their biological dad died, and he had PTSD and some stuff going on. It was tough on the boys. And for our oldest, that totally showed up in schoolwork, right? And he was just there was a 2-year period where it was just, school was a nightmare, right? And now he's in college on the dean's list, and And Katie and I, all we did, right? This is not on us. We were there for him through the hard times and we're there with him through the good time. You know what I mean? He knew that, but those were some hard nights, right?
Yeah.
Going to bed, knowing or struggling so much. And it's like, man, we're there. We're talking to him, letting him know, trying to go support and having an element of faith in just that your children are on their own journey and they can get there. You can't protect them from everything, though you want to, right? And you can't make their decisions for them once they're getting older, because then they're not living their life, they're living your life. And that's easy when they're making great choices, right? It's like, oh man, you joined band. Awesome. Oh man, you dropped band. And now you're hanging out with the guys who vape. Wait a second.
Sometimes they just need a little support and time. And we kind of have to have faith they'll come through it, because they're living in your home with your values, which are solid. We can control that. And give them a little time to come through it. And maybe there's always that test to say, okay, are you gonna judge me?
Yeah. So what I've been doing for fun and considered professional research, I got my substitute teaching license.
Oh, wow.
Right? So about once a week, sometimes less, I'll go in, and my goal is to get through all 12 grades, right? I've been through about 8, and it is.
Oh, it's like a reality show, Steve.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Film this.
It is. Yes, it is awesome. And to see at each of these different grade levels, what's going on in different environments, in different classes, different schools, and just, the biggest thing that I've gotten out of it so far is to realize that these are kids at each grade level. Because I felt this myself, right? I go to work. I wish I could go to school. No, I do not. And if you're in the schools with them, it's like they are in so many of what they're doing, they're at their max level. Think about after working at your best to survive for 8 hours, then you go home. I got a better understanding of that need, not only for us when we come home from work to have some sort of transition process we do so we don't bring work, but to give our kids some time to switch gears. One story, kindergarten, they made gingerbread cookies, and then at one point they went somewhere and all of us went and hid the gingerbread cookies, and then the kids are all marching around to go find the gingerbread, and then we put them back in the room, and it's like the biggest event in kindergarten for the year, right? When 2 of them didn't make it on the adventure because they just melted down, and they just need some space. And watching this, and it's fun and it's exciting, and it's like any adventure. Some kids are all in, some kids are kind of like walking from the background. And then after this big adventure, they still have 6 hours to sit through class. And it's just, school is way more complex than I had given it credit for and had really forgotten, right? It's like,
yes.
Oh man.
Imagine on that note that school, I wish I could go to school, which is of course always hindsight. You want to recapture, we want to recapture our youth, and it seems innocent now. But imagine if this was a job description. Would you want this job? Okay, you're going to go to a building and all of your ex-girlfriends and boyfriends are all there. And you've got an ex-girlfriend right here, and you've got your best friend right here that there's tension with, and now learn chemistry.
And your manager is going to be testing you constantly.
Right. You're going through hormonal changes, learning how to relate to people, everything in one building. And you got to focus on algebra. And look at us as adults. That's, wouldn't take the job. It's a no-brainer. Like, you know what? I already work with certain people, kind of conflict of interest. We take our mental health days and we look out for our environment.
And then throw in a quarter a quarter of your coworkers hate the job. They think it's BS, and they're going
Right.
to act like that every day.
Yeah. Yes. And talk about how this is never going to help them,
And it's stupid.
and it's stupid, and that's
And
the
you're
pressure.
stupid if
And
you do anything.
you're right, and you're uncool for trying.
And now that we've bashed how horrible school is, I do want to throw on the flip side. There's been some times, and so I'm the sub, right? 75% of the time I'm watching Zootopia, right? 4 times in a row, right? They give them a video, make sure nobody kills each other. You just did a
Right.
good job, Steve.
Right.
But every once in a while I get to watch them do a project, which is a nice break, and it's really cool. There'll be a table like a week ago. It was this project, and one table, they're just like, yeah, we're not doing this. And I'm like, well, thank you for your honesty. Just, keep it down. Cause what
Yeah.
they were very clear. We're not doing this. The other table, there's
We're not
was
doing
having a
this.
blast. Yeah. Oh, it's an option now.
We're not doing that. Wow. I never thought of that when I was young. I would just be disruptive.
Right.
We're not doing this. Okay.
But the other table they're making this huge, cool water cycle thing with everybody else is drawing a picture poster board. They're making 3D construction, and they're having a blast. So it's like both things are going on. It's wild. It's wild to be back and seeing that from the total, adult perspective.
Well, Steve, this has been enormously fun and helpful.
Yeah, I liked it too, Dan.